The morning sun spilled through the dusty windows of Harborline Avenue just as a young woman named Serena Vale shoved open the side door of her struggling bar, the Mooring Light, unaware that her life was about to shift in ways she could not yet fathom. The day had barely begun, but tension already twisted through her chest like a rope pulled too tight. She had spent half the night staring at invoices, half of them overdue, and the other half stacked like silent threats against her livelihood. Serena had never imagined that the business she loved, the dream she built to honor her late mother, would be clinging to survival by its fingertips. The clatter of bottles settling on shelves echoed sharply, and she paused, staring at the empty stools and the sunlight streaking across the worn countertop. Something in the bar felt fragile today, like the wood itself understood her fear. And just before she could drown in another wave of worry, the door creaked open, letting in a quiet stranger who would soon reshape the entire story of her life without meaning to. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the unexpected ways life can change, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Midnight Reports to support stories like this. Serena noticed him the moment he stepped inside. He looked out of place, too clean, too neatly dressed, and far too calm for someone entering a neighborhood bar at 10 in the morning. His simple charcoal shirt, faded jeans, and worn backpack suggested he lived a modest life, though his posture held a curious confidence that didn't match the rest of him. She barely had time to wonder about him before the soft scraping sound of a broom sliding over tile reminded her that she wasn't alone. Raiden Briggs, her janitor of 4 months, was already working in the back, cleaning the very floors she could barely afford to pay him to maintain. Raiden was older than Serena by at least 20 years, with gentle eyes that carried the heaviness of a life shaped by more storms than calm seas. His uniform was faded, his shoes scuffed, and yet he always greeted her with a warmth that made her hardships feel less suffocating. She often wondered why a man with such intelligence in his eyes worked such a draining job for barely minimum wage, but Raiden never said much about himself. He simply worked quietly, steadily, as if doing so gave him a sense of purpose. The stranger approached the bar and set down his backpack. Serena offered him a faint smile, but inside she felt the familiar sting of embarrassment. She hoped he wouldn't notice the uneven shelves, the flickering bulb in the far corner, or the menu board that needed repainting. She didn't want pity, she just wanted a fighting chance to turn things around. The man asked for the cheapest drink on the menu without hesitating, and Serena's stomach twisted at the thought that even that small payment mattered. She watched him from the corner of her eye, noticing the way he observed the space, not with judgment, but with a strange, thoughtful interest. While she prepared his drink, Raiden continued sweeping, humming softly, as sunlight sharpened the silver strands in his dark hair. Serena loved that hum. It anchored the room. It reminded her that even in chaos, someone cared enough to bring gentle energy into the space. But she had no idea how much he carried inside his own worn-out heart. The stranger lingered for an hour, quietly observing, sipping, and occasionally watching Raiden in a way that Serena couldn't quite decipher. When he finally finished and reached into his backpack to pay, he patted his pockets and stiffened. Serena watched him grow uneasy, clearly searching for money that simply wasn't there. His face flushed with discomfort, and he mumbled something that Serena recognized instantly, apologies of someone who didn't want to be a burden. Without thinking, she waved it off, telling him he could pay later, though deep down she knew he never would. Still, she couldn't find it in her heart to embarrass him. She knew too intimately what it felt like to be drowning quietly. But what she didn't expect, what nearly brought tears to her eyes, was Raiden stepping forward, pulling a small, wrinkled bill from his pocket, and handing it to her with a quiet firmness that brooked no refusal. Serena stared at him. That money was meant for his lunch, maybe even his dinner. She knew it. But he offered it without hesitation, without fanfare, without asking for a thank you. The stranger's eyes flickered with something Serena couldn't interpret. He took his backpack, nodded deeply, and exited without another word. As soon as the door closed, Serena turned to Raiden, overwhelmed. He simply shrugged and kept sweeping. He lived like that, doing quiet kindnesses the world rarely noticed. Hours passed, and the bar remained painfully empty. Serena tried fixing the menu board, taping up loose wires, checking stock numbers, but nothing distracted her from the thought of her overdue rent or the weight of payroll she could barely afford. When Raiden brought out a crate of empty bottles, she almost told him the truth, that she might not be able to keep him employed next month. But the words lodged in her throat like shattered glass. She couldn't break the spirit of someone who kept giving even when he had so little himself. The sun climbed higher. She stepped outside for fresh air just as a sleek black car turned onto the street. It gleamed beneath the daylight like polished obsidian, far too luxurious for this worn-down part of town. Serena watched in confusion as it parked directly in front of her bar. The tinted window slid down, revealing the stranger from earlier, but his demeanor had shifted entirely. Now he sat upright, shoulders squared, eyes sharp with a determined energy. The driver stepped out, opened the back door, and the stranger emerged wearing a look of unmistakable authority. Serena froze, heart thundering. Something powerful was at play, something she didn't yet understand. He approached her with calm, purposeful steps. Her palms grew damp as he introduced himself properly. Not as a broke traveler. Not as a man struggling to pay for a cheap drink. But as Keller Rothwell. As in Rothwell Holdings. As in the billionaire philanthropist and real estate magnate whose company owned half the coastal district she lived in. Serena's breath fractured. She could barely process it. This man, this quiet stranger who looked like he owned nothing more than a backpack, was actually one of the wealthiest and most enigmatic figures in the region. Her throat tightened painfully, embarrassment crashing over her. She felt small, foolish, unprepared. But he didn't let her spiral long. He explained that he had been visiting local businesses in disguise as part of a private initiative to understand how everyday workers treated strangers. He wasn't interested in fancy service, he wanted to witness genuine humanity. Serena could still feel the weight of Radon's wrinkled bill in her memory, still see the look of humble sincerity in his eyes. The billionaire noticed her trembling and reassured her that she had shown compassion without knowing who he was, but it was Radon's gesture that had struck him deeply. He stepped inside the bar and asked to meet the janitor personally. Serena called Radon forward, and the older man wiped his hands on his uniform, confused but polite. Keller looked him directly in the eyes, studying him with a complexity Serena could not interpret. Then he explained what he had seen, how the quiet integrity of Radon's gesture had revealed a rare depth of character that could not be faked or bought.